So we are having an uncomfortable conversation about the Vancouver Canucks today. And I only say it's uncomfortable because the word has gotten a hold of other teams' fan bases as well. We are no longer just Canucks fans talking about this, but other fans are being introduced and giving their opinions, and it's making things a little bit overwhelming. So let's dive into the scoop, because today we're talking about Vancouver Canucks defenseman Zeev Buium. Now, the big conversation surrounding Buium these days is his contract status. Right now, Buium is on his ELC, that in which expires at the end of 2027, thus making him eligible for an extension this summer. Word around the block is that Buium could go out there and demand a pretty reasonable $9 million-ish a year if he goes up to an 8-year deal. Now, there's a lot of incentive for the Canucks to go out there and do that. This 8-year structure is no longer going to be available for players by the time September 15th rolls around, so it's kind of a necessary point to get this done now if you were intending on doing 8 years in the first place. Now, this isn't actually new information. We have made videos talking about Zeev Buium and the contract situation. $9+ million was a talking point we had a few days ago. But let's dive into where that $9 million number comes from, and why we are seeing some ample reaction all over the internet as to what that looks like. Take a look at what NHL Rumor Report went out there and posted. This was what Donnie and Dolly said last week. On the Canucks to-do list this summer, we'll be getting an extension done with Buium. I see a lot of people thinking 8 years and $8 million per. If it's an 8-year deal, I can see it being $9 million. Top reply says, $9 million for what? Buium hasn't done crap this season. Bro has 23 points in his NHL career and he's going to make 9+. Unbelievable. You have Mike Bardner, who said that this cannot be real. You have Jay Fresh, who said, call me old-fashioned, but I feel like even if you're paying for potential, you gotta make sure the guy is a player before you dump 60 to 70 million bucks on his lap. And attached to Zeev Buium's JFresh card, his wins above replacement number is at 21% at the moment. You had Jack Jablonski saying, this can't be. I still very much believe in Zeev Buium, and I think he's got a bright future, but there is no responsible reason he should be getting an 8-year extension, and at that rate. What happened to earning your money and proving your worth? For reference, Zeev Buium this season has 23 points in 67 games played. He is on pace for 26 points over the full calendar year, and this is his first NHL season. You're paying for potential if you're giving him $9+ million a year. You're paying for a guy that has won gold medals and championships everywhere he has gone, and you're paying him that with the expectation he'll be able to do it with your team too. The Habitant went out there and said this, if Zeev Buium gets paid more than Lane Hutson, quite literally just 1 year after Lane signed his contract, somebody in Vancouver will need to be fired, LMAO. Now, there were a number of replies that actually work this out and explain where that $9 million number comes from and why it's not actually the worst thing in the world. Here is what Marco D'Amico went out there and replied to the Habitant. By the way, D'Amico is a primarily Montreal-focused guy, so take that with a grain of salt here. Zeev Buium, like Hutson, is a 10.2C RFA without offer sheet and arbitration rights. Even with the increase in cap going from $95 million to $104 million, that would be shocking. 8x8 or 8.5 given his body of work would be more than fair, especially if the Canucks properly structure it with bonuses. Meanwhile, you have Thomas Drance, who replied saying this, welcome to how cap growth works. Mark Spector responded saying, he is 20 and he has 5 NHL goals. Handing him a $60 million deal is the recipe for ruining a young player. He'll be much better off when he earns it. And then the market. If the cap continues to grow like this, we'll have reset, so you'll pay even more. and you won't be able to structure the deal as advantageously because of the new CBA. And now you've missed an opportunity you can't afford to miss when you're 32nd last in the league by a mile. Spector's point is, making Zeev Buium fabulously rich before he has accomplished anything could very well deter him from becoming the player you think he'll be. You already have one of those in Van already. Why create more? Drance replied, because you can't go from 32nd to 1st in an era of cap growth doing things conventionally. You need to take some swings at creating extraordinary value. If he's a winner, like Yossi or Barkov were when they got paid early, he'll handle it like a pro. Well, then you'd better have different people making the calls on the player's character and worth to the franchise. They're in this hole because they've erred on too many of those assessments. Now, that's fair and accurate, but also just one of the many issues for the Vancouver Canucks. And I think the biggest illustrator as to why this Zeev Buium $9 million number even exists is because of what we have seen out of New Jersey and Anaheim. Luke Hughes broke the market. Jackson LaCombe broke the market. You have both of these guys signing new contracts after their ELCs in the $9 million AAV territory mark. Luke Hughes had 2 40-point seasons, and then he had signed for an extraordinary amount that he only got because his last name is Hughes. Jackson LaCombe, he's also going to make $9 million a season. He had 40 points last year, 50 points this year, so you can say it's already paying off. But Jackson LaCombe went from 17 points to 43 points to $9 million. It was both of these guys that set the new standard for what young defensemen can get paid. And the fact is, Zeev Buium is 2 years younger than these guys, and you can debate that he has maybe even a higher ceiling than them. Now I can understand the perspective that says, hey, ceiling schmealing. Zeev Buium only has 23 points at the National Hockey League level. That would be paying him so much money for so little work when you mathematically calculate how many dollars per points you're actually getting here. And that is totally fair. But I do particularly agree with the way Thomas Drance assesses it as well. The cap is growing, and for a Vancouver Canucks team that is dead last, you need to do as many things as you can to try to maximize the value of your assets. And with Zeev Buium, a player whose ceiling is in the same area as what a Luke Hughes could be if he pans out to the absolute peak of his ability, I would say that you take swings. If they don't work out, Vancouver is still going to be bad for the next few years. Pettersson's going to be an anchor on this team. Zeev Buium might be an anchor on this team if he doesn't pan out and he's making $9 million a year. But the Vancouver Canucks are going to have to go through a long-term, extraordinary rebuild. You take swings when you can, and I'd say that this is one of those swings. Is $9 million a lot for a guy who's only gotten this amount of points? Absolutely. But these two guys broke the market. And now we're looking at other contracts around the NHL like they're steals. Absolutely, the Lane Hutson contract is a steal. That guy, he's going to be making 8.8. And he's got a Calder-winning year. He's got a point-per-game year. He is the first defenseman in NHL history to get 30-something multi-assist games in their first 2 seasons or whatever the heck it is. Move over Bobby Orr and Paul Coffey. Lane Hutson's over, and he's getting these numbers. Zeev Buium can be making more than Lane Hutson a year after the Hutson contract was signed. And it's not because he's better than Hutson, but that's just how the way the NHL is trending. That's where we're going. Zeev Buium is 2 years younger than Hutson. There's still room for him to get better, and I probably would wager a bet and say that he does. To what extent, we don't know. To Luke Hughes levels, or Jackson LaCombe levels, or Lane Hutson levels, we don't know. But the Vancouver Canucks, it seems like at this point, they might have no choice but to make that bet if they don't want to get messed up like they did with the Quinn Hughes contract situation this season. With that said, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about this Zeev Buium $8 by $9-ish million conversation? It's ticking off a lot of fans all over social media because the tweet was just posted yesterday, even though the info is technically from last week. But with all that said, let me know in the comments all your opinions on Zeev Buium, Jackson LaCombe, Luke Hughes, Lane Hutson, and more. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.